Good morning, everyone. Thank you all for getting up after your partying and showing up early. I'm going to consider you all the uber motivated fans of these filmmakers, so make sure you give them a lot of love, okay? It's my honor to moderate this panel and bring up the filmmakers today who are all debuting their films here at the festival. Let's start with Amrou Al-Kadhi, LA-based filmmaker, debuting Layla. Next, we have Arun Bhattarai, Bhutan-based filmmaker, debuting his documentary, Agent of Happiness. Next, we want to welcome Greg Jardin, LA-based filmmaker, debuting a science fiction thriller called It's What's Inside. Next, we have Shuchi Talati, Brooklyn-based filmmaker, debuting a feature film entitled Girls Will Be Girls. And finally, we want to welcome Sean Wang, LA-based filmmaker, debuting his feature film entitled Didi. So today, really, we want to celebrate these filmmakers, give them a lot of love, lift them up, and make sure we amplify their work and get the word out. Obviously, debuting your film at Sundance is such a huge, huge dream and a thrill, and they've each already shown their films to packed audiences a couple of times this weekend, but we really want to be, let's be the audience that really shows them how proud and how excited we are for them. So we're going to start out. I'm not going to assume that everybody in this room has seen every single film up here. So we're going to do just a brief intro of the films. So I'm going to ask each filmmaker, starting with Sean, to just say a little bit about the trajectory that brought them to make the films they have brought here to the festival and what their films are about.
Hi, everybody. Good morning. My name is Sean. My film is called Didi. And Didi means little brother in Mandarin, but it's also a very endearing term that a lot of Chinese parents call their younger sons. It's what my mom used to call me. And our movie is a very personal, semi-autobiographical coming-of-age story about a 13-year-old Taiwanese American boy that takes place in the late 2000s in the Bay Area where I grew up, very much in this late MySpace, early Facebook, prime AIM era. And the seed of the idea really came from, what if you took a movie like Stand By Me, or any of these coming-of-age classics that I love, movies like Stand By Me, Ratcatcher, Water Lilies, 8th Grade, This Is England, but had it star people who looked and talked and felt like the kids that I grew up with. And I grew up in a very multicultural community. I grew up with a lot of children of immigrants, a lot of Asian American kids, and just see what that did to the movie, but very much treat Boyhood with as much crassness and loud, raw vulnerability as those movies kind of did for me. And then just see what that did to the movie. And then over time, it kind of grew to just kind of make it a hyper-specific portrait of this boy. And over time, it also grew into more of a love letter to immigrant moms. And I kind of describe it as a love letter to immigrant moms, inspired by my own mom, sort of encased in the trappings of a movie like Stand By Me.
Thanks.
Love that. Just in India, Didi is older sister, and my brother calls me Didi. Hi everyone. Good morning. My film is called Girls Will Be Girls, and I'll give you the logline. In a boarding school in the Himalayan mountains, 16-year-old Mira discovers desire and first romance. But her sexy, rebellious coming of age is disrupted by her mother, who never got to come of age herself. Yeah. I started writing from a place of rebellion. I went to a very conservative school where, we were not allowed to forget dating, but not hold hands with boys or even talk too much. If you were talk too much, you were reprimanded. And I remember a teacher saying don't talk to boys more than necessary. So I wanted to write kind of a sexual awakening story of a young girl against this backdrop, because one, that this is something that we don't talk about, and two, this is something that I had never seen on our screens. So that was the first impetus, and I wrote a sort of triangle between a young girl and her first love and a teacher in a boarding school. And then as I continued to write the film, it kind of somehow, the teacher turned into a mom character, so the character kind of changed, and now the story is between Mira, her mother, and her boyfriend. And what happened through the years was like, one, I grew up and I grew closer in age to the mom than the daughter. And I started to see like these women that I had known as a teenager, where I thought, they were a little too flirtatious with the young boys, the teachers who would maybe bend over and show a little cleavage to the, senior students. And I thought it was so icky and gross. But I kind of started to see it differently. I'm like, as you grow older as women, you lose cachet, society sees you differently, and it just creates, and you watch a younger generation have more freedoms than you did. Like, how are you supposed to feel? There's a kind of pride, but there's also envy and like sadness for having missed out. So I kind of grew to have so much like love and compassion for the older woman, the mother character. And so I then ended up writing from a place, hopefully, of love and compassion. So that's the trajectory of the film. So from a disrupted coming of age, I think the film turned into a mother-daughter love story and a dual coming of age.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Greg Jardin. I have a movie called It's What's Inside. It's What's Inside is we're pitching it as a sci-fi thriller with a lot of jokes. It's about 8 old college friends who get together for a party because one of them is about to get married, and an unexpected a friend who has not RCP'd unexpectedly shows up. This guy is estranged. He's a bit of a weird guy, and he brings a suitcase. And inside the suitcase is something that spirals the night out into what we are calling existential dread. It's a little hard to talk about because we're trying to keep like the whole plot of the movie under wraps. But that's our general pitch. At its core, it is about an examination of the male gaze and what the sort of consumption of over-sexualized media, pornography, Instagram sort of does to couples in relationships, how that affects body imagery, how if a woman is in a relationship with a man and the man is on a steady diet of pornography and sort of like novelty-based screen media, how that affects the type of woman he wants, and more importantly, how that affects the woman that he's in a relationship with as his partner. So I love sci-fi so much, and I feel like the best sci-fi is sci-fi that has like a sort of out there concept, but that truly examines a piece of the human condition. So that's what this movie is trying to examine.
Hi, I'm Arun Bhattarai. My film takes place in the Himalayan kingdom of Bhutan, where happiness is high on the agenda. So it's called Agent of Happiness. It's a documentary film about a guy who goes around the country measuring the happiness levels of the society. So through him, we kind of get to meet different people from different social classes in Bhutan, and we get to kind of go deep inside what happiness means to all of us as individuals. So for me, I'm a Bhutanese, so I grew up listening to studying gross national happiness in my schools. So in Bhutan, I don't know how much aware you are, there is a philosophy, like the main philosophy in Bhutan, it's a development philosophy, is called gross national happiness, where it says that gross national happiness is more important than gross domestic product. So like happiness is really high on the government agenda. So there is a department of happiness. There is a screening tool for happiness, and they make policies based on whether people are happy or not. So it's taken very seriously. But me, when I was growing up, I really didn't understand why. So this was a process for myself also to understand what happiness means to individuals as opposed to what it means to a nation. Yeah, so that was kind of the trigger with which I started this documentary film.
All your films sound so good. Hi, I'm Amrou Al-Kadhi. Sorry. My film is called Layla, and it's about a young Arab drag queen who is incredibly uncompromising on stage and pretty fearless on stage and seems to sort of take no prisoners. But off stage, they have quite a kind of compromised emotional life, and they fall in love for the first time ever, but because of a lifetime of code switching and hiding who they are from their family and trying to please everybody else, they're completely lost in love, and they end up constantly altering themselves in order to please their lover. And so I guess when I started the film, drag was obviously really kind of rising, and I think when people see drag queens, they assume kind of fearless confidence and a really assured identity. And I think in Layla, the film starts with a lot of drag and then sort of pulls the rug, I think, by showing that the drag is also a bit of an illusion, and Layla actually has a lot of different drag identities when it comes to their family or their lover. And so I guess I never really approached writing the film as a story, or I didn't really have kind of a plot in mind as much as a character who we watch in loads of different environments and locations, and we see how they change themselves for every single location. And so I think the film is really about the kind of queer intersectional experience of having to constantly chop one bit of your side identity off in order to exist in another. But also, the film is really not traumatic, and it's about queer joy and queer Arab joy. I think someone came out of a screening in the Q&A and they said, I kept waiting for the twist where, they get gay bashed or something, and there's none of that. And so I also just wanted to make a film that just was about the messiness and fun of queer Arab life.
Yes, thank you. We need a lot more joy and celebration. Thank you for those quick recaps. I want to talk about characters, picking up from where you left off. Each of your films has a strong protagonist or protagonists whose identities are a core part of the story and the plot. And I'd just love to ask each of you who've made feature films, how you approached character development, what, if anything, you brought to it from your own backgrounds and your own lived experiences, and how did casting, if at all, influence or change your original vision and what ended up being the final product? Let's start here.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I think it's tricky because Layla, the character, is about 23 and I'm 33. And so I've learned a lot of the lessons that Layla hasn't. And as a writer, you can be tempted to sort of, what's the word, kind of throw what you know into the writing, but actually the character doesn't quite know what you know because they're going to be making all the mistakes that you've suffered in order to then make the film. And so there are a lot of times in the film where Layla's naive, and I kind of was judging that as a writer for a while because I was like, I don't want people to think I'm naive. I know this is a really stupid thing to do. So actually, like, realizing that the character doesn't understand kind of what you understand as the writer, I think is quite important. And also, navigating. I made the film through the UK, and which is very white, but I had a great support with the BFI and Film 4. But I felt there was quite a lot of pressure to over-explain the character in the writing, and I think that slowed down the green lighting process because people were quite confused by Layla as a character. The fact that there's like essentially fisting themselves on stage, and sorry, it's 9 a.m. Dancing happily on stage, at the top of the film, and then in the next scene, they can't even hit on a guy because they are so unsure of themselves. That was a script comment as a flaw in the script, why they seem so confident, and so I found the development challenging because, queer Arab life, it is really, there's a lot of contradictions, and the character, Layla as a character lies all the time. They lie about their family being really homophobic in order to get their white lover to feel more sorry for them, so he'll have sex with them. And that was a script comment of what, but they're not homophobic. I'm like, yeah, because brown people lie too, So, so yeah, just I found the character development quite a lot of explaining to do to the fight before I could then turn it back when I started filming it.
Yeah, so I got so lost in the answer. Could you remind me what the question was again?
Tell us about character development among your protagonists and how, if anything, you brought your own identity into those characters.
Yeah, so our main character is Shelby. She's biracial. She's been in this relationship with this white guy for 9 years since college. Like I was saying, he enjoys his screen-based novelty time, and that's sort of done an effect on her, and that just kind of came from I've spent a lot of my really adult life thinking about the amount of sexualized media porn that we all are sort of given at a young age here in society, how there's a sort of normalization to it, or at least in my circle, just like the idea that everyone's like taught like it's like it's is this oh thanks
wait,
that's right
I had it.
How it's normalized, and so like how that can really affect someone's body image, like what we as men or as straight men are taught to sort of want in a woman, a very specific type of woman, I think, which in my experience has been like a white woman. I'm half Asian, and so that and I feel like that affects us all. So we cast Brittany O'Grady, who's biracial, and that was just important to me because as her and I talked about, and I'm sure we have biracial people in the house right now, you just sort of grow up inherently feeling like you're not really sure where you belong, and if there's one part of culture that society values more, which in my case I grew up thinking was Caucasian culture, I just felt like you sort of have to hide part of your identity to essentially just be more successful. So that whole idea wrapped up in the male gaze is kind of what I tried to bring into Shelby, and I just yeah. Thank you.
We'll just keep playing that game. I feel like I answered part of this question in the first question, but when I think of like how my identity infuses character development, in a way, it's like kind of two parts to it. Like one is like how my personal experience affected the character development. So our protagonist, Mira, she is, like I said, in a very strict boarding school, and she's the head prefect. What that means is it's sort of like a hall monitor, but for the whole school, and she's in charge of enforcing the school rules. So she's kind of put in this complicated position where she wants to break the rules and is coming into her own as a sexual being, but she has to police all her friends and, pull them up for their skirts not being like long enough and things like that. So I was a head girl, and I was in that position, and I was somewhat naughty and broke rules. So some of that is very personal. And then the rest of it really is like, I think there's an emotional truth, that is very, I'm this, what I was saying, like the kind of envy that women are often forced to feel because of how society views us and what society values in women. And that was a very personal idea. So I think that's how my personal experience infused the storytelling. And then the second part of the identity question is like, what does it mean as an Indian woman writing Indian women? And I feel like sometimes us writers and filmmakers from marginalized communities, when we make stories, we're expected to make larger statements about Indian women or about like an issue. And this is something I personally, as a filmmaker, really resent, because what that does is that kind of flattens our characters and they have to become stand-ins for whole communities, and they can't be weird and complex and just have the full spectrum of humanity. So for me, like in that sense, it was very, very important that Mira and her mom, Anila, they're not stand-ins for Indian women. They're particular, they're complicated, they are imperfect, and I think that's something, and that I'm not trying to explain our culture, or like Amrou was saying, like we're writing for ourselves in a way, and we don't have to highlight an issue to say, hey, our stories are important too, please pay attention,
Before I talk about our protagonist, I want to shout out Shirley Chen, who's right there, who is also starring in our movie. She plays Vivian, who's our sister. She's very embarrassed, but she's amazing in our movie. And if you don't know her name, you will soon. I think with our movie, like I said, it's semi-autobiographical, but it's and the lead character is, I think when people watch the movie, I think they're obviously going to think it's me, and I wanted to kind of play with that sort of what is real, what is not. When I watch movies like Lady Bird or shows like Rami or even like The Farewell or Minari, I'm like, they're telling a story. From an audience perspective, I'm like, they're telling a story, but I know it's based on some nugget of autobiographical truth. And I think part of the fun for me as an audience member is, where did they modify? Where did they adjust? What is autobiographical, what is personal, and what is fabricated? That for me, that's fun. And so I think I kind of wanted to do that with this movie. I wanted to dive into the autobiographical to get all the personal, specific details that makes the entire world and texture feel lived in. But then I wanted to, and this is something I wanted to do and I didn't really do super successfully until I took this movie to the Sundance Screenwriters Lab, and my first creative advisor there was Lulu Wong. And we had this incredible meeting, and she really helped me crack the script open, which was twofold for the movie, but also the protagonist, which was, I think what she said to me with what she did with The Farewell was I had to, what she did was she had to get hyper specific with the personal, and then completely remove herself from the personal and look at it objectively and see how the personal serves ultimately the story. And I think that's what I wanted to do with our lead character, who played by Isaac Wong, who is incredible, which was, ultimately I think our movie is about a young Asian American boy and how shame manifests itself in a young Asian American boy's life, especially in that era, in the late 2000s, whether it's personal shame, cultural shame, societal shame. And so ultimately it was, what was the version of that in my life? And then taking those details and being like, okay, how do we serve the themes of the story? So when I look at our protagonist, I see me in there, obviously, because some of it is pulled, but it's also like, it's not me. I see him as a character. And in terms of casting, I think we got so amazingly fortunate and lucky with Isaac. We met on Zoom, and I think from the very beginning, I was like, we're street casting all of this. I didn't want to cast these like really trained kids, because you see kids who grow up acting and they look at the camera and they're like, hi, like, how are you? They're very polite, and I'm like, I don't want a polite kid. I don't know. Isaac's polite, I guess. And and Isaac, we Zoomed a ton. We did a ton of Zoom auditions, and I was like, he's really, really good. But Isaac is a trained actor, and he's been in other things before that were more, he is a child actor, so he's done more sort of like kids movies. And I was like, oh, I wonder if he has that sort of more punk adolescent side to him. And I think on Zoom, something always gets lost in translation. But I was like, there's something there. But, and we were like, maybe we're not sure. But, like, I felt some sort of thing with him, and we kept reading with him. And I was like, there's something there, but I don't know. I need to discover more. Because on Zoom, he's still kind of polite. And I had the also great fortune of taking this movie to the Sundance Directors Lab. And what that is, where you actually get to kind of bring sort of 4 people. They don't have to be from your cast, but we were kind of already in prep. And so I got to bring Isaac and Shirley, and we kind of put a scene up on its feet. And I remember meeting Isaac, and he was like, oh, hey, what's up, man? And I was like, oh, cool. He's like, kind of got this, like, he's not like, hi, like, nice to meet you. And I remember they do this very, very, very special ceremony at the Director's Lab where the entire sort of group of people, which is like hundreds, maybe, I don't know, sure, 100 or so. You should join this panel. Big field, giant field. We walk up, and it's a giant circle, and this Native American tribe leader kind of goes around to everybody individually and blesses them personally, and it's like a 2.5-hour ceremony, and we just kind of stand in silence and kind of be one with the land. And he says in the beginning of it, he goes, this is a long ceremony, but your standing is a sacrifice. And so, if you get tired, obviously, sit, don't force yourself to stand, but your standing is a sacrifice. And he starts the ceremony, and we're kind of near the tail end. He starts the ceremony, goes to the first person, second person, third person, and then Isaac sits down cross-legged and just goes to sleep. And I looked over at him, and I was like, oh my God, you are making me look so bad right now. But then the other part of my head, I was like, oh, he's perfect. Like, I was like, he's such a punk, but he's also trained. And so he had the perfect balance of, like, understanding what we needed from an emotional arc and being able to tap into that in a very confident way. But also, I think he's such a real kid. He's a BMXer. He's not, like, trying to be nice to everybody in a good way. And I think even, if I can speak on his behalf, I think, he was kind of, I think, becoming jaded about acting and was like, I want to spend my summers being a kid. I want to BMX and hang out with my friends. And I think he was kind of, like, maybe not being super excited about acting anymore. And I think we gave him this opportunity to, like, be an actor, but also just be a kid. Like, we surrounded him with all these first-time actors. And the first, like, 10 days of our shoot, we didn't shoot anything with the family. And so he was just in this, like, 13-year-old place where we were like, forget everything you've ever learned about being a trained actor, except the, like, get your lines right. Like, just curse, be a kid, like, be you within the version of this character. So I'd like to think we gave him sort of the mind meld of what he loves.
Yeah, and it shows through. It's he's excellent in it, and so are you. So nice to have you here. I'm so glad several of you brought up this balance of the very specific and the universal, because that's really your ability to do that as filmmakers is probably why you are here and why you were selected. These are not Asian American films. These are not an Indian film. They're not the thing that is in that box, but everything about your characters. They're struggling with wanting to meet the expectations placed upon them, to break away from those expectations, to carve out a new space. And so there's this struggle for each of them that's very universal, but then the specifics of their identities, their culture, their families, where the places really come through. So congratulations to all of you for striking that balance. Arun, let's turn to your documentary, which I really enjoyed, Agent of Happiness. The central character is just so perfect in embodying all of the questions that you're trying to raise with the film. And I just found each of the mini stories within the film also very powerful. The government of Bhutan, or the kingdom of Bhutan, is also a character, an invisible character throughout, an ever-present but invisible character throughout. And I did worry about the potential for repercussions and retaliation for some of your characters, because they are, they're supposed to be selling that story of Bhutan being the happiest country in the world. So I just wondered how you thought about, and cared for your subjects? Because these are real people. These are not characters and actors. They don't live in the movie. They live in real life. Tell us a little bit about, did you explain to them how you were using these interviews? What would come of this film?
Yeah. I mean, the main character of the film, Amber, it was interesting, like how we met him in the beginning, because about 5-6 years ago, we were doing our previous film, and then I was staying in my hotel room in the eastern part of Bhutan, and two guys, they walked to me and they said that they want to do this happiness survey with me. And then I said, okay. So I sat down with them, and then they had these 148 questions with them, and the whole survey, it took like 3 hours, and they were asking me questions like, how many cows do you have? How many tractors do you have? And whether I quarrel with my neighbors, like really, I think very important questions as well. I mean, things that you often forget, yeah, that was the kind of the point when actually I kind of fell in love with the main character, Amber, because he was like so serious at his job, but at the same time, he was very laid back. He was really funny as well. And then as I got to know him better, I realized that he himself is searching for his own happiness, like he was searching for love. And he was not able to find love because he didn't have a citizenship. So and it was very interesting for me because I also didn't have a citizenship as a Nepali minority living in Bhutan. I also didn't have a citizenship for a long time, and I got it after many years of waiting. So that's how I actually got connected to the main character. So with him, it was such an organic process. It looked like he really wanted to share his story with me. So it didn't feel like he would have any like repercussion as such. Also because this was a temporary job that he was doing. This happiness agent, like this. He was doing it for a year, and then we were following him. Of course, the repercussion would come to me as a filmmaker for sure. But with the main character, I think he really wanted to share his story with me, and of course he understood that it's still a kingdom. Bhutan also has, it's a constitutional monarchy, so it's kind of it's not a free society. But at the same time, last few years there is a process of integration that's being started by the new king, and a lot of these people who don't have citizenship they are getting it back. So when I think the film is actually coming out at the right time as well. So for Amber, I think it would help him actually to get his citizenship, I think so, and he feels that as well. And with the other characters, it was like we were talking about casting. So when I was following these two agents going from home to home doing this happiness survey, actually it was also a process of research for me because I was finding some very interesting characters along the way, and they became my side characters, and we would go back to them again and again to film with them and to create these mini portraits. So, and what the process would be like, we'd always tell them that, we are doing this documentary at the site. So if you are interested to be part of it, then you can, otherwise, it's okay. So of course we were, the funny thing is that we always thought that, people, they are, they might be forced to talk because, there are these two guys representing the government and, doing this happiness survey. But it was kind of the opposite. It was like people were kind of waiting to talk. Like they wanted someone to come and, ask them questions so that they could share their deepest feelings. And sometimes it's in the Asian context, I think, at least in Bhutan, which is a very small society, sometimes it's easier to talk to outsiders than inside the family. So, and also in Bhutan itself, because it's such a small society, you kind of, everybody, and you cannot avoid, everybody is dependent on everyone. So in fact, some of the characters that I met during the filming, I would meet them next day on the road, or I would be there in their wedding ceremony, or so it's like so it's really like usual for us to kind of depend on each other. It was easier that way for me to explain to them why I'm making this film. And one of the things that I do, at least with documentary film, is that because it's difficult to explain to people that, oh, this is not a reportage, this is not a journalistic piece that I'm doing. So I usually show them my previous film to say that this is what I'm actually doing. So it kind of helps them to understand that, oh, this guy actually is going to keep coming back to me. He's not here for just a week. Yeah.
It's beautifully shot. The cinematography is just stunning, and it's also a film that doesn't have, even though there are so many characters and so many subjects that are being interviewed, it doesn't have a lot of dialogue, and so you really have to lean in, and you want to lean in and look for the subtle cues and the facial expressions. My favorite vignette is the man who's talking about how happy he is, surrounded by his 3 wives, and you just look at the facial expressions of the women as the man is explaining how happy and benevolent and joyous his life is. It's a beautiful thing. So well done. So congratulations. Well, let's zoom out from the individual films a little bit, and let's talk a little bit about the industry in the context of your careers, because none of you are newbies to the industry. You've all worked on other films, other television shows. If you look back, whatever the time frame may be, 10, 15 years, and compare it to the industry that you see yourselves in today and working in, do you see progress? Could you have made your films today, the ones that you made today then? Would you have found the financing and all of the partners? Tell us a little bit about, looking back and where the industry has come.
That's a really good question. Well, I started out in the industry as an actor, and I'm Iraqi, and so I have seen a real difference because I've played quite a lot of terrorists on screen. My first job was in Munich, actually, playing a terrorist son, and I've played quite a few, actually. And so that's sort of why I gave up. I do actually still perform, but I sort of just thought, this is bullshit. Sorry. This is horse poo. I don't know. I just thought, and so I just started to write my own stories and do that. So certainly, and actually the lead actor of my film, Bilal Hasna, who's absolutely incredible, who's 23 now, we've had discussions, and he's like, I haven't had a single terrorist audition come my way. I got your film. It's obviously not, perfect. So I've noticed that. I think. And obviously, I think there is a hunger within the industry for, diversity and representation, though I do still think there is a lot of explaining we have to do. And this film was quite hard to get greenlit, just because it's a queer Arab film, but there's no real trauma and there's no real I think there is a lot of sadness in the film, but in a quiet way. And we just had to explain a lot what we were trying to do in a way when I think a white person makes a romance, they don't have to explain much. Whereas we had so many people pulling at us saying, no, we want more of the family. We want more of this. We just want to understand everything about this person's life. And obviously you can't do that in a single film. So yeah, I've definitely, and my career I've written on shows where there are lots of Arabs that have nothing to do with terrorism. So, it is getting better, though I do think we are having a slightly neoconservative moment right now. I think a few years ago, I work in Hollywood, and I was able to write and pitch shows that were quite out there. Now that the industry's contracting a little bit, a lot of shows that I was working on, one which was greenlit, have been dropped. I think the industry's really now wanting to go back to sort of this is more TV than film, but kind of lowest common denominator stuff that's not too specific. I've noticed that in TV very much.
A little bit tight on time. Anyone else?
I've been trying to make this movie for 8 years, so I can factually say it could not have gotten made 8 years ago because I straight up tried.
Same.
Yeah, I was the same age as my protagonist 15 years ago, so I don't think I could have pitched it. No, but I do think one tidbit to add is like, we look at this movie as like a movie that's set in 2008, but not necessarily feel like it's made in 2008, because all the movies made in 2008 didn't star people who looked like us at all. And so it was kind of like all the movies that shaped me, let's put a version of ourselves in there. You know, like movies like Superbad. It's like, what is the version of that takes place in that time period, but it stars a bunch of Asian American kids. But it's not, like you said, it's not an Asian American story. I think we kind of describe this as like, it's a movie about an Asian American. But that, I don't know if that makes it an Asian American story. I think that's hopefully for audiences to decide.
Well, I can tell you 10 years ago, this house didn't exist. And so we have the Sunrise Collective to thank for bringing all of us together and creating this space. The fact that we can do 3 days of programming, celebrating and congratulating and featuring and honoring and giving voice to Asian American filmmakers is in and of itself progress in our field. So again, we want to congratulate all of you. We hope you're having a wonderful festival run and that you're getting all the love and respect that you deserve for these projects. And to all of you, please go watch these films. If you don't get to them while you're here at the festival, you can watch them online. And of course, through all of your social media and other channels, please promote these friends. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.